Welcome, Gun Runner.
Sega! When talking about the biggest names in video games, there are few, if any, as influential as Sega. From their undeniably outstanding legacy in the world of arcade games, to their many home consoles, and even their forays into multi-format publishing, which still includes some of the most popular franchises ever. But for every successful console they produced, there's another that's less so. In fact, you might be surprised at just how many Sega branded systems actually exist. So in this video I'm going to look at 5 such examples, a quintet of consoles that many people haven't even heard of. I'm the Laird, and this is the story of 5 obscure Sega consoles.
Sega ビデオゲーム SG1000
Sega トンネルだスリップゾーンだおおスリルとスピードゲームセンターの興奮そのまま
セガモナコグランプリ
Sega お父さんには麻雀もありますアメリカ横断弾丸で目指せニューヨークぶっ飛ばして順位を上げろゲームセンターの興奮そのまま
Sega GP レース
Sega! Okay, so let's start off with a console that's actually fairly well known amongst retro gamers, the SG-1000. The main reason for including Sega's very first home console on this list is that it never actually got a Western release, unlike its successor, the best-selling, well in Europe and South America anyway, Master System. In fact, the only places outside of Japan to get the console were Taiwan, New Zealand and Australia. The SG-1000 was first released in 1983, on the exact same day as its biggest rival, the Nintendo Famicom. However, despite Sega's huge success in the arcade market, the console failed to capture a significant slice of the home market, with sales of less than 1 million units. Despite its relative lack of success, there were still 2 further models of the system produced, the officially licensed Othello Multivision and the redesigned Sega SG-1000 Mark II. Interestingly, this model number is what led to the original version of the Master System being called the Mark III in Japan. There are a number of different reasons that are cited for this system's lack of success. Firstly, the inferior hardware when compared to the Famicom, most notably in the areas of colour and sprites, which led to similar games always looking worse on Sega's system. The games library was nowhere near as strong either, with just over 70 games being released for the console. The bizarre thing about this is that Sega actually managed to pump out 21 games in the first year of release, compared to just 9 from Nintendo. But Sega have since admitted that they failed to capitalise on this early boost and didn't really take the console market seriously until they saw the huge success of the Famicom, by which time it was too late. The SG-1000 has an interesting legacy in video game history, however. Firstly, the console featured no less than 4 games by the legendary Yuji Naka, who would go on to create Sonic the Hedgehog amongst many other big hits. It also became the first system to be released in both console and computer forms simultaneously, being joined by its slick-looking sibling, the SC-3000. It was also one of the first systems to be based on what became known as the MSX standard, and was almost identical to the ColecoVision on a hardware level. Lastly, due to the Master System being based on an upgraded version of the SG-1000 hardware, it was backwards compatible with all its games, making it one of the first consoles to have such a feature, only being beaten to the market by the rival Atari 7800 Pro system. Despite Sega's recent attempts to embrace its retro gaming roots, they seem to have totally ignored the existence of the SG-1000, which is a shame given the system's legacy.
Hey, you. Now, sir.
Give me the Cyber Razor Cut.
A Cyber Razor Cut.
Yeah!
They're over 100 megabyte games.
They get faster, they get harder.
What are you going to do to keep up?
Who's next?
To be this good, thanks, Sega.
Whilst there are a lot of different variations of the best-selling Sega Mega Drive, there's no doubting that the Mega Jet is the strangest of them all. Only ever released in Japan, this all-in-one unit was originally designed for Japan Air in 1993 for customers to rent from them in flight. The console has no screen, but everything else is built into what looks like a giant controller. This is because all Japan Air planes have a small LCD TV built into each seat. So you just had to plug your Mega Jet into this, rent a game, and away you go. Seeing this idea and thinking it was cool, well-known car audio accessories manufacturer Alpine also commissioned their own version of the console too, to be used with their similar in-car TVs. So with this in mind, it seems incredibly bizarre that Sega decided to market the system at retail themselves too, albeit only in Japan. I can only guess that they saw a gap in the market to exploit, even if it was an incredibly niche one. Unsurprisingly, the retail Mega Jet was less than successful and disappeared from the market within a year of its 1994 release. The Mega Jet did leave an interesting legacy though. Impressed by the miniaturised design, Sega of America developed it further to add a screen and turn it into the Sega Nomad, the full handheld successor to the Game Gear. However, a high price and poor battery life meant that sales of this system were also very disappointing too.
Welcome Video Driver. Attach Video Driver to your television set, as you see here. Make sure the white line lines up with the top of the support brackets. If you need help, pause the tape and ask someone to help you.
The Video Driver, also known as the Family Driver in Japan, was a dedicated video game system designed by Sega and distributed by Taiko. It was first released in 1988 and actually represents an early use of motion control technology. But perhaps the most interesting feature of the Video Driver is that it used VHS tapes as a storage medium. The Video Driver is basically a battery-powered steering wheel attached to a bulky sensor. The sensor was then meant to be physically attached to your television, though it was soon found that it only worked on TVs under 20 inches in size, which was a major flaw in its design. This sensor sits in front of the TV looking at the screen. Mounted on top of the sensor is a small plastic car, which can be moved left or right across the top of the unit by steering the wheel. Special VHS cassettes devote the bottom section of the picture to flashing white lights. These lights are then picked up by the sensor as obstacles, with the player having to move the car out the way to succeed. If you do this successfully, points are added to a mechanical scoreboard mounted on the actual Video Driver unit. There are also gears mounted on the unit too, which need to be adjusted to match the rate of the flashing lights, adding a further challenge. Only two games were ever released for the Video Driver, California Chase and Road Race, both of which were bundled on the same cassette and essentially the same game but with different footage. Two further games, Police Pursuit and Road Race 2, are known to exist, but were never officially released. These are said to be the same thing, only with different footage. The Video Driver was largely unpopular with the general public and was discontinued just a year or so after release.
A child's mind is like a sponge, absorbing everything.
Middle-aged men who want to be teenage girls next.
So make it the right things with Pico. It turns TV into your kid's first computer and turns on the power of their imaginations. With Storybook software, turn the page and images come alive on TV. Kids learn numbers, music, reading, and more. Most kids spend 3 hours a day glued to TV. Pico makes it a smart 3 hour.
Whilst the Sega Pico is not particularly well known, it was actually a very successful venture for the Japanese giants. This is probably because it wasn't designed or marketed as a traditional home console, being envisaged as an educational device for children aged between 3 and 7. First released in Japan in 1993, the Pico is closely based on the Mega Drive hardware internally, but the external design is very much reminiscent of a laptop computer. Rather than a joypad, the Pico also utilised its own unique control options in the form of a Magic Pen stylus, mouse and built-in buttons. Games were played from more traditional cartridges, however, that Sega referred to as storyware. The edutainment-focused games featured many of Sega's own mascots, such as Sonic the Hedgehog and Eco the Dolphin, as well as other popular franchises such as Winnie the Pooh, Donald Duck and even Lego. With sales of 3.5 million worldwide, the Pico was considered a huge success for Sega, especially in Japan, where the vast majority of systems were sold, and it wasn't discontinued until 2005. Several revisions of the console were made during this time, including the Pico Bina and Beaner Lite in Japan, which were both enhanced versions of the original hardware, and a budget-priced North American version by Majesco, although these did prove less successful than the original unit. Due to its design and concept, the Pico is something only really hardcore Sega fans will want to invest in.
2つの頭脳が同時に動く2つの頭脳が同時に動く
2つの CPU が同時に動く未来性のパソコンテラドライブ
楽しい賢い
For many Sega enthusiasts, the Terra Drive and indeed its European cousin, the Amstrad Mega PC, which I will mention in due course, is the ultimate dream machine, a full-blown PC compatible that can also play Sega Mega Drive cartridges. I mean, what's not to love about that? Manufactured by IBM and designed by Sega, it's certainly a very sexy looking system. However, it was crippled somewhat by a litany of issues that very much counteracted its interesting hybrid design. The biggest of these was that it used an Intel 286 CPU, which was almost 10 years out of date by the time the Terra Drive arrived in 1991. It's also been noted that due to the rather compact design of the system, it was rather prone to overheating. It was hoped that people would develop games and other software that could utilise both the PC and Mega Drive hardware at once. But outside of the bundle package, which included a simple falling block puzzler with a game editor, none was ever released. Although Sega and IBM planned to release a much more powerful Terra Drive 2, the huge failure of the system meant that these plans were soon cancelled. This makes the system incredibly rare, and it now fetches very high prices on online auction sites. Meanwhile in Europe, leading British PC manufacturer Amstrad saw the idea of the Terra Drive and approached Sega to come up with something similar. However, rather than use the existing design, Amstrad came up with something much cheaper to produce that was far less underpowered in the PC area. The Mega PC contained both the 32-bit 386 SX computer and a full Mega Drive motherboard with the same well-ventilated case, and a clever panel on the front that allowed you to switch between the two. This meant that they could not interact with each other in any way. They were very much separate hardware that just shared a case and a monitor. The Mega PC was very well received by the British gaming press and had many teenagers drooling over the images. Once again, the high price of the system put many people off though. It was no more expensive to just buy a Mega Drive and a 386 PC separately, which made it rather pointless, not to mention the fact that if your dad was using the PC for work, you were stuck twiddling your thumbs. This meant that Amstrad cancelled the much publicised 486 based follow-up and just stuck to producing more standard PC compatibles instead. Again, the Amstrad Mega PC fetches very high prices in the modern day, and the difficulty of obtaining a complete system is only made more difficult by the proprietary keyboard and specially branded controller, although you can use a standard Mega Drive pad if needed. And that rounds up my look at 5, well, 6 if you count the Mega PC too. We'll call that a bonus entry, Sega consoles that you might not know existed. I hope you enjoyed this historical flashback, and make sure you subscribe to my channel for more of these short documentaries. Sega fans in particular should check out the playlist to find videos on unreleased Sega hardware such as the Dreamcast Zip Drive, Master Drive, Neptune, Dreamcast Pace and Saturn II. But I would love to know what you think. Do you think Sega could have made a success of any of these systems? And which ones would you most like to have in your collection and why? Please let me know in the comments and join in the discussion below. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following patrons in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Mitchell Valentino, James Taylor, Neptune, Chaotic, Seth Robinson, Carl Olsen and DOS Gamerman. New rewards have gone out to all of you this week. If you want to help support my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now, where you can get access to a host of extra content including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.